Before we get to the satisfying part, and trust me, there is a satisfying part, I need you to understand something about HOA neighborhoods that nobody talks about. Everyone knows the rules, everyone signs the paperwork, everyone smiles at the block party, and then, completely out of nowhere, one person decides that the entire street belongs to them. Not legally, not officially, just in their head. And once that person decides you're the problem, your life changes. Every single morning. You wake up and your first thought isn't coffee, isn't work, isn't your family, it's, what is she going to do today? That woman out there, leaning on my fence right now, like she owns the deed to my lawn, is Karen. And in about 45 seconds, Karen is going to experience what I can only describe as a physics lesson she did not sign up for. She's going to go from standing upright, full of authority, absolutely convinced she runs this block, to face down in my grass, unhurt, undignified, and completely, 100% caught on camera. But here's the thing about revenge stories. The payoff only hits right if you understand exactly what created it. So, I'm going to take you back, all the way back, to the version of me who thought this was just going to be a bad week. Stay with me, because this story has layers. It has HOA meetings, it has lawyers, it has a woman named Donna who became my unexpected guardian angel, and it has a fence panel that I spent 3 nights engineering to be, technically, completely legal. This is the full story of how I turned a nightmare neighbor into a cautionary tale. I moved in 4 years ago. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I told myself, this is the last Tuesday of my old life. Starting Wednesday, I'm a homeowner. I'm officially an adult with a mortgage and a lawnmower and opinions about fence stain colors. The house had good bones, 3 bedrooms, a deck that needed work, a backyard that my dog immediately claimed as sovereign territory. The HOA fees were manageable. The neighbors seemed normal. There was Gerald from across the street, retired, grew tomatoes, waved at everything that moved. There was the Chen family 2 doors down, 2 kids, always in a hurry, always polite, and there was Donna, to Karen's other side. Donna who, I would later learn, had been through this exact same thing 6 years before me and had the documentation to prove it. Her name was Karen Whitfield. I know because I've seen it on every HOA complaint form she ever filed. There were a lot of them. For the first 2 years, total silence. I barely saw her. She waved once or twice. I waved back. I thought, okay, normal neighbor, we're going to be fine. I was catastrophically wrong. It started small. It always starts small. That's the thing about this kind of person. They don't announce themselves. They don't show up on day 1 and say, hello, I'm going to make your life difficult. They wait. They watch. And then one day, something flips in them, and you are suddenly the enemy in a war you didn't know had been declared. It was a Tuesday when Karen knocked on my door for the first time. I opened it and she was already irritated. That tightly wound, I've been building to this energy that some people carry like a weapon. She told me my weeds were spreading into her yard, that she had a pristine lawn, that she'd maintained it for 9 years. I looked at my lawn. There were, by my count, 3 dandelions near the fence line. I told her I'd take care of it. I went out that afternoon and pulled every single one I could find. I also checked her yard from the sidewalk. She had more dandelions than I did. I didn't say this out loud. I smiled and went back inside. That was my first mistake. Not the pulling, the smiling, the compliance. Because what I didn't understand yet is that Karen wasn't actually bothered by the dandelions. She was testing me. And when I passed her test without pushing back, she learned something. This neighbor can be pushed. She came back 6 days later, this time about my porch light. She claimed it was shining directly into her bedroom window, that she couldn't sleep, that she had a medical condition. I stood at my porch at night and looked at where the light actually fell. It was angled down, pointed at my steps, approximately 12 feet from Karen's nearest window, at a 45-degree angle below horizontal. For that light to be shining into her bedroom would need to be floating significantly above my roofline. I checked. It wasn't, but I was still in appeasement mode. I bought a directional shield for the bulb. $11. I installed it. I texted her to say it was done. She did not respond. Then the comments started. Little things at first. Observations about my trash bins, my dogs barking, my car needing a wash. Then, one Saturday, while I was mowing my lawn, she leaned over the fence and said, "The man who lived here before you kept this property immaculate. He had standards. This street had a certain character." She wasn't talking about lawn standards. This street had a certain character, is doing a very specific kind of work. She was telling me, in the most deniable way possible, that I was not the right kind of person for this neighborhood. I didn't confront it directly. Instead, I went inside and called Donna. Donna and I had been friendly, but not close. That phone call changed everything. I told her what had been happening. There was a pause on her end, the kind of pause that means someone is deciding how much to tell you. Then she said, "The man who lived in your house before you, she drove him out. It took her 8 months. He sold at a loss, just to get away from her. And before him, there was a young couple. She made their lives impossible for a year and a half before they gave up." I sat down when she said that, because suddenly the dandelions and the porch light and the certain character comment wasn't 3 isolated annoyances anymore. It was a pattern, a proven, successful, deliberately executed pattern of targeted harassment. Donna told me she had kept records going back years. She'd tried to bring it to the HOA and had been dismissed, partly because Karen was on the HOA social committee and had relationships with the board. "She's very careful," Donna told me. "She never technically crosses a line. She makes your life miserable in ways that are hard to prove. And when you leave, she's at the sale looking sad, telling everyone the neighborhood just isn't what it used to be." I made a decision on that phone call. "I'm not moving," I told Donna. "I live here, I own this home, and I'm going to document everything." Donna said, "Good, because I've been waiting for a neighbor with the patience to actually fight back." I attended my first HOA meeting in month 3, not because I thought it would help. Donna had already warned me it probably wouldn't, but because I needed to see it with my own eyes. About 22 residents showed up. Karen was already there, seated in the front row, chatting warmly with Margaret, the board president who had been in that chair for 11 years. They had the energy of 2 women who shared a book club, a wine preference, and a very unified theory of how the neighborhood should be run. 20 minutes in, Karen raised her hand and was immediately called on. She had a folder, an actual manila folder with printed photos. She passed them to Margaret, who looked at them with the slow nod of someone performing concern. None of the photos were of my property. They were of Gerald's tomato planters, the Chen family's basketball hoop that had been there for 2 years, and a minor paint peeling on Donna's siding that Donna had already scheduled to repair. When I finally got the floor, I asked what the specific violation was for each property and what the process was for addressing them. Margaret looked at me like I had asked for a detailed accounting of the moon. "We operate on community standards," she said, "not just written rules. Sometimes it's about the overall feel of a neighborhood." I wrote that down verbatim, because the overall feel of a neighborhood is not in any HOA bylaw I had ever read, and I had read all 47 pages of them. I had spent a full Saturday going through our covenants, conditions, and restrictions. I had highlighted every rule, noted every ambiguity, compared the fine structure to similar HOAs in the state. And what I found was this. Karen had filed 11 formal complaints in 4 years, 7 against the previous owner of my property, 3 against the couple before him. None had ever resulted in action. She wasn't using the HOA to solve problems. She was using it as a paper trail, a document that made whoever she was targeting look like the difficult neighbor. It was a sophisticated operation. I left the meeting and called a lawyer. Just a consultation. The lawyer said something I've thought about many times since. Harassment doesn't have to be dramatic to be real. It just has to be consistent, targeted, and designed to make someone feel they don't belong. Document everything. Let her build the case for you. I went home and bought a new notebook. I labeled it the Karen file. It was dark humor, but it helped. 2 weeks after the HOA meeting, Karen escalated to a level that made everything before it feel like a preview. I was in my backyard with my dog. Quiet evening, nothing unusual. Karen appeared at the fence line. Not knocking, not calling out, just standing there watching me until I noticed her. Then she said, "You know, I've been thinking. You'd probably be happier somewhere else. There are nice neighborhoods on the other side of town. More diverse, more suited to your lifestyle. This neighborhood has a history. Not everyone fits into it." There it was, not coded anymore. I stood in my own backyard and made a choice in about 3 seconds. I did not yell. I did not threaten. I took out my phone, pressed record, and said, "Say that again, please. I want to make sure I heard you correctly." Her face changed. A flicker of recalibration. She pivoted and said I was just making a suggestion. "You don't have to be so aggressive about it. I'm standing in my backyard," I said. "My dog is sitting. I haven't raised my voice. Can you explain what you find aggressive about this?" She left, and she didn't speak to me for 11 days. 11 days of beautiful golden silence. And then she came back, louder than before, because scared people don't back down. They escalate. I want to take a break from the tactical stuff for a minute, because I've been telling this story like it's a chess match, and it was. But it was also something else. It was exhausting, genuinely, physically, emotionally exhausting, in a way I wasn't prepared for. Because here's the thing about sustained harassment from a neighbor. There's no escaping it. You can leave a bad workplace. You can block someone online. You can end a friendship. But you can't leave your house. Or rather, and this is exactly what she was counting on, you can leave and she wins. Every morning I woke up with this low-grade dread. Is today going to be a Karen day? Is she going to be at the fence when I take the dog out? My sleep got worse. My focus at work got worse. I started coming home by a side route that added 3 minutes to my drive because it meant I could pull into my garage without passing her front window. I was routing around my own neighbor in my own neighborhood. I talked to a therapist about it. She used the phrase psychological siege, which I had never heard applied to neighborhood disputes before, but which felt exactly right. A siege doesn't require dramatic violence. It requires persistence. It requires making the target feel like there is no safe space. It requires, eventually, making leaving feel like relief. I'm telling you this because if you're in something similar right now, what you're feeling is real. The exhaustion is real. The instinct to give in and move is completely understandable. But giving in doesn't solve it. It just moves the problem to the next person. I wasn't giving in. By month 5, Karen had a ritual. Every weekday morning between 6:50 and 7:15, she would come out to the exact fence panel where my kitchen window was visible and wait. When I appeared, she would start. Not always loud, sometimes just loud enough to hear through the glass. "You're a disappointment to this entire street." She said it so matter-of-factly, like reading a weather forecast. I documented every incident. And every day I noticed, she always used the same fence panel, same posture, same angle, full upper body weight on the top rail, leaning forward into my yard. I started looking at that panel differently, not with anger, with curiosity, and then with something that might have been inspiration. I am not an engineer. I took one physics class in college, got a B-, and have spent most of my adult life as a person whose understanding of structural mechanics is limited to this feels solid and this does not feel solid. But I know how lever arms work, and I know how to spend 3 days watching YouTube videos about fence construction until I understand what makes a panel stay where it is, and what would make it not stay where it is. Our shared fence, which is my property, confirmed by the survey when I bought the house, was a standard 6-foot cedar panel fence. Each panel attached to rails with screws through metal brackets. Standard construction. The panel Karen always used was the second one from the north post, right at the corner where my kitchen window was most visible. Over 3 nights, I made some modifications. The principle was simple. A panel held at the top but released at the bottom behaves like a flap. Push the top toward my yard and the bottom swings out toward hers. I replaced the bottom bracket screws with smooth steel pins, the kind that look exactly like fasteners from the outside, but carry no load against lateral force. To anyone looking at the fence, it appeared completely normal. It was solid under normal conditions. But if you leaned heavily on the top rail, the bottom would release and the panel would rotate forward. Not drop, not fall. Rotate. Like a slow, controlled door. A weight behind my ornamental grass would stop it from going too far. A tilt of about 40 degrees, enough to gently deposit whoever was leaning on it onto the soft grass, and then settle back to nearly upright. I tested it with a weighted bag. I tested it with my own hands. I sat outside at night pushing on it until I was confident of exactly how it would behave. Nobody would be hurt. The grass was soft, the angle was gentle, the physics were precise, and it was completely legal. I had modified my own fence on my own property. I had consulted a lawyer. They couldn't identify a statute that made it illegal, provided the person who fell was not injured. I was certain she would not be injured. I had done the YouTube videos and the weighted bag test. Close enough. I set it, smoothed the grass, and waited. Monday, 6:58 in the morning. I was standing at the kitchen window with my coffee. Not waiting exactly, but aware. The way you're aware of weather when there's been a pattern. At 7:02, Karen's back door opened. She came out the way she always did, purposefully, wearing her morning robe, coffee in hand, settled into her routine, the way people get comfortable in anything they've been doing for months without consequence. She approached the panel. She called out through the glass. Something about my gutters. Something about me not being worth the property taxes. I wasn't really listening to the words anymore. I was watching the posture. She shifted her weight forward, put her left hand on the top rail, leaned in, and the physics took over. No crack, no explosion, no violence. The bottom of the panel simply swung out, smoothly, the way a door opens. The whole thing tilted forward in one graceful, unhurried motion. And Karen, who had committed her full upper body momentum to leaning over that fence, found herself suddenly committed to a trajectory she had not planned for. She went over the fence in what I can only describe as slow-motion dignity. There was a moment, just a fraction of a second, where she was completely horizontal, parallel to the ground, suspended between upright and landed. And then she was on the grass, face down, arms slightly out, robe intact. Coffee, remarkably, still mostly in the cup. I timed it later. From first lean to full landing, 1.4 seconds. I set my coffee down. I walked to the back door. I opened it. I stepped outside. Karen was already beginning to sit up, unhurt, but absolutely, profoundly, universe-shatteringly surprised. "Are you okay?" I said. She stared at me. She opened her mouth. She closed it. She opened it again. "Your fence is broken," she said. "This is your fault. I'm going to sue you. I'm going to call the HOA. I'm going to..." And that's when we both heard it. The quiet clearing of a throat from the side gate. Donna had been my neighbor for 4 years and my ally for 7 months. 63 years old, retired from a career in paralegal work, which explained her very organized approach to documentation. She grew roses, she drove a sensible sedan, and she had, for the past 3 weeks, been running a systematic video surveillance operation on her own backyard for reasons that were now about to become very apparent. She was holding her phone up, screen facing Karen, and on that screen was a video. Not just of this morning's event, though it had that too, from a perfect angle showing Karen approaching the fence, leaning, and going over with all the grace of a felled tree. It also had the previous 3 weeks, every morning visit, every comment, everything Karen had said that no longer had any deniability because it was now on a crystal clear recording with a timestamp and audio. Karen stood up. She looked at the screen. She watched herself say, "You're a disappointment to this entire street, and you'd be happier somewhere more diverse," and a dozen other phrases that, played back in sequence, told a story that couldn't be argued away or recontextualized. The color drained out of her face like watching a tide go out very quickly. Donna said, "I have 22 separate recordings. I have documented incidents going back 3 years on my own property. I have the name of an attorney who has already reviewed the footage and confirmed it meets the threshold for a harassment claim. I also have contact information for 2 other families in this neighborhood who Karen has done this to before, both of whom have signed statements." Karen said nothing. Donna said, "I also called Margaret last night and let her know I'd be bringing this to the full board meeting next Thursday, with copies for every board member and a copy for the attorney we retained last week." Still nothing from Karen. Donna said, "And just so we're clear, I'm not asking you to leave. I'm asking you to stop. The difference matters because we live here too, and we're not going anywhere." Karen picked up her coffee cup, looked at it, looked at the fence, looked at me, looked at Donna, and then she walked back into her house and closed the door. I looked at Donna. Donna looked at me. "I made scones this morning," she said. "Come over." I locked the back door, put the fence on my to-do list, and went to eat scones with the most prepared human being I have ever met. Within 48 hours, Karen filed 3 complaints with the HOA. One about my fence being structurally unsound, one about my lawn, one about my dog. Margaret, who had previously received every Karen complaint with warm attentiveness, was now in the uncomfortable position of having received Donna's packet the previous evening. A very comprehensive, very organized, very legally annotated packet with a note from the attorney, the video footage index, and the written statements from 2 previous families. Margaret did not call me about my fence or my lawn or my dog. What she did do was resign from the board 3 weeks later, citing personal reasons. The timing was notable. The new board president, a man named Robert, who had been quietly frustrated with the previous administration for 2 years, called me within a week of taking over. He told me he'd reviewed the documentation. He wanted to apologize on behalf of the board for how complaints against me had been handled, and he wanted me to know the system was going to work differently going forward. He was as good as his word. The HOA issued a formal notice to Karen, the first she had ever received in 9 years of filing complaints against her neighbors regarding her pattern of conduct. It wasn't a fine or an eviction, but it was on record, and it meant the next incident would have a paper trail that started in her file. Karen went quiet. She tested the fence once more about a week later, but I had put the real screws back in the following morning. She knocked on it with her hand, the way you test ice, and got a normal fence. She hasn't said a word to me since. But the mornings are quiet now. My dog goes out without either of us dreading it. My sleep is back to normal. I park in my driveway and do not think about Karen at all. That might be the most satisfying part of this entire story. not the fence, not the video, not the HOA resolution, just ordinary mornings. The right to be in your own home without bracing for what's coming. It turns out that's not a small thing. Here's what I learned, and what I wish someone had told me at the very beginning. Document everything from day one. Not because you're expecting a war, but because you can't go back and document what you didn't capture. Know your HOA documents better than the board does. Read all 47 pages, because most people never do, and that's exactly how people like Karen stay in power. Find your Donna. There is almost always someone else who has been through this and is waiting for someone with the patience to fight back. Consult a lawyer early, not to take immediate action, but to understand your options before you need them. Don't let the other person define normal. Each escalation is designed to make the previous level feel like the baseline, and your first instinct about what is acceptable is usually correct. And finally, you don't have to be loud to be effective. I never yelled at Karen. I never filed retaliatory complaints. I never lost my composure in any documented interaction. Every piece of footage, every written record, every witness account shows exactly one person behaving badly. And it wasn't me. I put the real screws back in the fence the day after. Did it with a cup of coffee and my dog watching with the patient curiosity dogs bring to all construction projects. The fence is solid now. My lawn is fine. Gerald's tomatoes are thriving. The Chen kids play basketball in their driveway every weekend, and nobody says anything about it. Donna and I have dinner once a month. She brings roses. I bring something from the bakery. We never run out of things to talk about. And Karen is just there. A neighbor. A quiet one, finally. She took up so much space in my life for so long, and now she takes up almost none. If you're in something like this right now, if you've got a Karen, an HOA board that plays favorites, a neighborhood that should feel like home but currently feels like a battlefield, it doesn't have to end with you leaving. It can end with them running out of power. It takes patience. It takes documentation. It takes finding your Donna, but it can end. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. Hit follow if you want to see what happened 3 months later when Karen tried one last move at the annual HOA election. It did not go the way she planned. My name is unimportant, my fence is solid, and my mornings are mine again.